Hello there. Welcome to DevSecTalks. I'm your host, Ashley Ward, and today I'm excited to be sitting down to chat with a very good friend of mine, Bryan Ross. Bryan is the head of technology products at Sky, a technology, media, and entertainment company operating across 6 countries. When it comes to the work we do as tech leaders and engineers, one skill that is often overlooked is the skill of managing people. With many years of leadership and management experience, Bryan is no stranger to this at all. We'll be talking through the various methods of structuring and managing teams in order to adapt to newer work cultures and working styles. Additionally, we'll talk through some of the lessons and advice Bryan has for leaders looking to improve their strategy and communication skills. Ready to get started?
Thanks, Ash. How you doing? I'm Bryan Ross. I'm working at Sky as head of technology products. My job is to provide platforms in Sky for other projects to use and make it ridiculously simple to get infrastructure to make projects happen.
I'm really excited by this series, as I keep saying in every episode, because we're dealing with all these different things that make up the IT world that we're in. So we've spoken to people about ransomware, we've spoken to people about how you deliver product, how you do things like this. And one of the areas that I'm always very interested in, because it's the people that matter, I think, is around structuring teams and managing teams. So over that time, when you've been looking, just as I mentioned, that change in the infrastructure requirements, what are the type of changes that you've seen from structuring teams?
So I think that's a really interesting point. I've been very fortunate in that I started off in small .com companies and I moved through various bigger organizations. But I've always been responsible somewhere in either leadership or management. So I think for me, what we've seen is the classical traditional enterprise where you've got development and engineering and then an ops side and really throw things over the fence to them. And we've seen that mature into DevOps where there's more focus on communication and collaboration. And I think now that's on steroids now, right? Where we're taking multiple different services, bonding them all together to make solutions. So there's more companies involved, more people involved, and it's more important than ever that we talk. So I think for me, the big transition has been IT being something that is a technical thing into something that's consumable. So people have technology in their phones all the time. They have expectations now about what that should look like and how that should work. I think a big thing for me now is when we look at budgets and we think about what we're going to build next year. Yes, it's important that something's cost effective. It's important that it's scalable. It's important that it's secure, but it's also important that it's nice to use. And how do you put a quality on that? So that's been the big change for me, I think, in technology. And I think the organizations had to change as a result of that.
What does that mean then? What do you think is the big change driver that's there, or what is it that's pushing IT towards that?
So I think it's the technology that's in part of all of our lives, right? So it's all about how that's changing for people, and I think that bleeds into the enterprise. So we had bring your own device 5, 7, 10 years ago. We get adverts in YouTube and all of our socials about these great services we can take advantage of, and there's an expectation now that we should be able to do that. We want to move faster, we want to move better. When I look at technology, because of my background in managed services, I don't think of technology as that technical thing anymore. I've always looked at it as a product. So it has to have a market, it has to have users, and those is what's going to make that a success or not. So in technology products, for example, we define that in many ways. Why are we different from a technology or an IT department? Well, for me, it's because it's not just the technology, it's about marketing. So we need to understand our users, market what we've got, make it consumable. We need to be really clear about how much it costs, not just now, but long-term as well. What does the support model look like? What can you expect from us day to day? How do you get in touch with us? How do we deal with integrations? So great, we've got the ability to do some cloud platform, but is that tied into the security framework that our security teams are doing? So does cyber have visibility in what that VM's doing, what that container is doing? How does that fit in? And then also what the support and policies behind it. So how can we use these products to drive the strategy from the business? How can we subtly change user behaviors for the better? And I think that's a huge part in technology. That's about bringing what is effectively dumb bits of silicon to life. It makes it part of our lives. And I think now, of all times, work and life are a lot closer than they ever used to be.
from you and your time spent being a manager and a leader, what's some of the tips that you've got for us?
So I was about to say, I think one of the things I've seen in management is that a lot of the time it's engineers that slide into management. So they begin all of a sudden with a new set of skills and they have to develop themselves and they get drawn further away from technology. And that can be difficult. That's a hard process. I think the first thing to do is to think about the separation between management and leadership. So if you've been in a technical background, you've probably displayed some elements of leadership that has caused someone to think, maybe you should become a manager. And in management really is different. That's about getting the best from a set of constraints, be that people, be that money, be that time, be that quality, security, etc. So I think it's important to understand those different facets of the role. I think being open with people and being honest, thinking about how the managers that you've had have impacted your day-to-day. Have you been empowered by a manager, or have you felt kind of talked down to them a little bit, or your kind of hopes and dreams crushed? You need to take the best of those. For me, I think it's about understanding expectation. So, for example, we have a thing called job families where we work out what do the different levels of role look like for everybody, and what do we expect? And those aren't around technicals; those are around behaviors. Those are, what does a senior engineer look like? What are the behaviors that they demonstrate that pulls them apart? So, are they spending more time to simplify things for others rather than working on a problem themselves? Are they there to celebrate the success of other people and bring them up and make sure they get, the time at meetings, etc.? Are you the person that you're in a meeting and you're listening and watching what's going on? You realize that the person in the corner hasn't said much, so you pause everybody else and you get their input. So, I think if you're going to become manager, I think it's, first of all, it's not as hard as you might think it is. I think it's just a new set of skills, and it's important to give yourself time to learn those. There's a huge amount of books and YouTube these days that you can look at and learn from some of the best. But really, I think it's just about being open with yourself, first of all, about what your strengths and weaknesses are, looking for help in those, and then carrying that forward for everyone else. In my personal experience, I think if you can demonstrate to people what it is you want, be clear about the outcomes that you're expecting, and be open and honest about why we're doing it, that will get you 90% of the way there. And sometimes bear in mind that what we do might not be what an engineer wants to do. Sometimes it'll be something different. But there's a reason, there's a justification. And for me, I was always happy to work on things as long as I understood how it fitted into the bigger picture.
So flipping that then on its head, how should somebody go about managing their manager?
Well, I think that's always the most interesting part. So I think first of all, it begins with you. So accountability is a good place to start. There was a cartoon recently that I saw which was brilliant. It was all around, oh no, this decision we've made has ended up in disaster. And there's been countless times in my career, both as a manager and previous, where I've made a decision. It hasn't gone the way we expected it to, but I'm not afraid to put my hand up and say, that was my call. It turned out to be the wrong one. I'm not embarrassed by that because I understand that I made those decisions with the information we had at the time. And also, yes, it's failed, but that means it's a learning opportunity. As long as we've not crushed the company in the place, in the way, that's kind of manageable. So I think the first thing is take accountability for your work. Don't be afraid to put your hand up. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. In many, many situations, as I've found out in life, it's more important to make a decision than worry about it definitely being the right one. You need to trust your gut to some extent. I think as well, if you're looking to manage your manager, you need to understand people. So you need to understand that your manager is just another human. They were probably an engineer at some stage. They've gone through various experiences in their lives, and they'll get to a point where now they're responsible for something bigger. So understand how they like to work. How do they like to communicate? Do they want to, is it best to give them a call? Is it best to give them a long email with lots of detail? Or do they want, usually, so for example, for me, it would be give me the bullet points, keep it, short and snappy. And then if there's something in there, then let's follow up with a call and get into the guts of it. I'll usually avoid long, tremendous emails. I'd much rather that was in documentation instead, right? Emails, if you're going to put that much investment of time into something, let's not put it in something temporary. Let's put it in a documentation store so we've got it to refer to later and others can refer to it too. I think as well, if you want to manage your manager, you need to understand they've got strengths and weaknesses just like everyone else, and not to worry about that, right? So if they're not great at something, help. If they're really strong in something, get them to help you. And above all else, your manager doesn't have magical powers to fix things. So I think a lot of the time it's looking at the problem and, without sounding too corporate, having that we can attitude. So rather than, well, we can't do this because we don't have budget, we'll turn that around. What would we need in order to make this easy, to make this doable? Sometimes that'll be budget. Well, we'd need 5 more people. Well, okay, well, now we've got something to shoot at. Now the manager is empowered to say, right, well, I will now go and fight for more resource, or I'm sorry, Ashley, that's just not going to happen. But how about if we were to take some of this other work away? Now that I know what the blocker is, we can work on that together.
Knowing that and having that, one of the things I asked somebody recently was about if someone's looking to go, well, how can I progress up? How do I show people that I'm the type of guy who should be going for these bigger and better positions? Or having decided that I want to go through a management route. I'm not suggesting that how do I become an architect or this kind of thing, but what are your tips to that person?
So I think the first thing to do is to realize the manager's job is to work on behalf of everyone else. Like all good leaders, I think that leaders eat last, as the book famously says. So you should be focused mostly on helping other people. How do you let others shine? How do you give others the benefit of your experience? Because fundamentally, that's really what a leader or a manager is there to do, is to somehow try and impart the experience or the accountability for something to give you a bigger picture view. I think from that front, if you want to be a successful manager too, I think that you need to begin to build those skills in areas that perhaps you haven't touched. And it begins by asking. So for example, asking, how does finance work in our organization? Do you understand how the team is funded? Do you understand how projects are funded? Is there CapEx and OpEx and all these wonderful things that, when you're working through a problem, you don't really need to worry about. But once you begin to realize how those things are put together, that helps you structure some of your asks. So if you're asking for more resource, there may be in your organization a way for that person to be funded. So how can I say, for example, that we've always had this external company involved and the cost of that is this, and I think that this would save us money if we do it internally. It'll cost these kind of bodies, but what's the cost for a body? So I think understanding some things around finance helps. I think spending some time looking at business in general is useful, and understanding what's going on in the wider picture. So I'd like to think that as an engineer that you've perhaps been working with other teams and helping them. So how does everybody know what your team does? Can you be that person that goes out and helps sell effectively what you're doing? Or likewise, do you understand the problems that your users or consumers have? Bearing in mind, we all have users, and in my team, we very much call them customers, which is confusing given that they're internal customers. But for me, I think it's important because the culture that I want to portray is one where we treat our users like customers, because if they don't use the services provided by my team, our team doesn't have a purpose anymore. And also, those users, one way or another, are going to pay for their services in some part. So yeah, if you want to become a manager, I think you need to look towards other people, and I think you need to ask. So you need to be brave, build up your network, speak to your manager and say, I'm interested in moving into management. How can I start? Bearing in mind, it doesn't need to be, line management, PDPs, performance reviews, and all that kind of stuff. It can just begin with taking control of a project, and then taking control of a program, and then being a technical authority on something. And then before you know it, you're looking after 5, 10, 50. The more success you have, the bigger that thing will get.
Thank you so much for coming along. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, as I always do. I'm really looking forward to seeing you again very soon, hopefully in person. That would be the best thing. You've got positions open at the moment at Sky, do you?
Well, I think that's customary, isn't it? That I meant to say we're always hiring. So I would say that, yeah, we're always looking for good people. Engineers interested in cloud, DevOps, SRE, anyone that's got an appetite for building those kind of products rather than just those technical bits, right? Anyone that's got that kind of mindset where we're looking for. I'd say as well, look, if anyone's looking for help in terms of their management career, drop me a line on Twitter or whatever, and I'll see what I can do to help.
A big thank you to Bryan for taking time to sit down with me today for this compelling discussion. And thank you, of course, for tuning in to DevSecTalks. Be sure to visit the link in the description below for details on this series, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on channel notifications to be the first to know about our upcoming episodes. If you're interested in being part of the series, or if you have any potential speakers you'd like to recommend, feel free to drop a message in the comments section below. See you next time.